Hello everyone, welcome to tonight's episode. Hidden storylines in the cosmic simulation. And if human beings were to wonder if the cosmos was a simulation, what would the most immediate texture of a simulated cosmos be? The hidden component is the unknown, or how we know the unknown. And the egoic construct has a utility in extracting stories. We are a story extracting intelligence from a realm that can endlessly be storified. That means really what knowledge is bedtime stories that were not told at bedtime. In the cosmic simulation suggests that, first of all, the term simulation means empty. That means if this is being simulated, if this reality right now I'm experiencing is a video game for the higher dimensions, it is hollow to the higher dimensions, but to the lesser dimensions it's filled with meaning. You know? Imagine someone is an expert swordsman back in the day. Now somebody comes and shows off, like, I don't know, like a swing of a sword. That expert swordsman knows the simulation and the skill of the other, knows what the other has not seen. Creating thing that eyes open up in this realm, and they in turn extract significance. To wonder about a hidden storyline is like trying to fathom all the children that will be born, that haven't been born yet. You know, that means it is unborn potential. So let us begin from here. Let's put the title in a different room for a second. And if I was to ask the average human being, who are you? The answer, the first clue we get to our intelligence is that it's through communication. We create ourselves in accordance to what the ecosystem requires. That means if suddenly there was an earthquake, your behavior would adjust to that ecosystem. So you can say our storylines, how we are a character in a story, it is the response, it is the bouncing back or the reflection of the animate qualities of the environment. There was a time, I'll tell you, in a family gathering, everybody in the room got angry at me. And everybody crowded. You know, some people were watching, but everybody crowded, and it was like, can you imagine a room full of people circling you, kind of like your back to a wall, and shouting at you? And I remember it was such an intensity, and there was such insincerity from some of the people there that it was too much. And I remember a bunch of people are standing around me talking. What I do is I sit down in the middle, so everybody's standing and I'm sat down, you know, because it was too intense. I sat down on the ground. It was hilarious. Can you imagine a room full of people shouting at you and then you sit on the ground, you know? It was a change of perception, and if we treat the body, the world being the environment of the body, and the body, which is from the world, being the environment of the mind, Right now, I find my life to be a storyline. It feels to me as if the story updates in accordance to new experiences, but there's also hidden elements to the story. One view is that there is nothing wrong with our perception, we just haven't seen truth yet. The other thing is, even if we try to see truth, there's inhibitions, blockades, barriers to perception. You know, the poet Rumi says, your task is not to seek love, but to get rid of all the barriers you have made against it. Your task is not to try to become, let's use instead of love, it's not to become great, it's to get rid of all the barriers against the greatness that is naturally there. When we consider it on a linguistic level, on a language level, the cosmos is simulated. The word cosmos is simulated in the void. All of human knowledge is present in an unknown place. And human emotions seem to be limited to how this unknown place is interpreted. You know, if you want to contain the world in a subject, uh, I personally feel that's impossible. It's there's no point to it in the sense that you stop living. Let me tell you, ideology can live your life for you. What does that mean? That means imagine there's a person who's a great violinist. We suddenly go back in time, and when this kid wanted to pick up the violin, suddenly you tell the kid, no, go play the drums. Literally, the violinist, the kid who was a great violinist, that parallel realm of being a great violinist becomes a hidden storyline, and the cosmos becomes simulated in accordance to different characteristics. We are human beings. We find ourselves in a changing world. We can consciously implement our free will to control our physical existence and our psychological communicatable experience. If we were to think about 8 billion creatures on a rock in the middle of nowhere, language would be the greatest tool, the greatest thing, the shelter of humanhood is how language is used and how it is accepted. You know, people feel language is an accurate representation of reality. Oh, how the continental philosophers have raged against this. You know, Ludwig Wittgenstein says the limits of my language are the limits of my world. I would like to say that we are language moving in a void without reason. Prior for there to be a need for reason, intelligence has opened its eyes. That means technically, before we reason everything out in this cosmic activity, there is the presence of intelligence. Now the issue is if the realm is interconnected, if there is a sort of integrative nature to the intelligence, as if this whole cosmos is an appearance in a film. Excuse me, not in a film, in a field. If there's an interconnectivity at work, nothing stands alone. The concept of solitude, loneliness, is meaningless. That means if energy can't be given a mask, truth never went anywhere. Truth never changed to itself. That means energy, but to the human eye, energy transforms from potential to connection. In front of our eyes, the system is too big and meaningless. There can be either endless purposes to life or there could be no purpose at all. Behind our eyes, in accordance to how the characterization has taken place, there can be endless purpose. There was a time I considered a purpose to my life that was only physical. I felt I was just a physical entity, and not just a physical entity, but I felt like physicality was the only thing that the free will had control over. I never knew that my attention could move while my body is silent. The presence of my attention. When I realized that the mind is active here, and what it is, it's imagine every person has two kinds of body. They have a mind body and let's say a body. The mind body is not being used. That means imagine you were living the whole lifetime without using one of your arms or one of your legs. You know what I mean? It would be something that is always there, but you didn't use it. And I would say that is the position to us that meets the eye. And we are obsessed with what is in the scene. Okay, so can people, the viewers, let me know if the sound is better? Does the sound better now? Okay. To continue, hopefully people have heard the last 20 minutes. Jesus Christ. Okay. So guys, I know that this isn't like a crowd, but anybody, there's 9 people listening. I want the 8 other people to clap for Dan in the chat section. Just in your rooms, wherever you are in the world, just start clapping. So thanks for letting me know that. Anyways, is reality made of stories? Pretty much this question is the essence. We are wondering if it's an object came first or a subject. If I treat myself as an object, the subject is limited. If I treat myself as a subject, how can I just be an object? The object becomes less meaningful. This idea of the cosmic simulation, in ancient times they would call it a dream. There's a quote from a man named Michael Talbot who wrote this book called The Holographic Simulation, which someone years ago told me about, but I never read the book. But I saw the author's interview, a live interview of the author on YouTube talking about it. There was a quote though. Michael Talbot says, "We are not born into the world. We are born into something that we make into the world." I would say that the subject is something we are making in the world, but the world is, in some sense, there is no concept. So I feel we are an unknown attention transitioning through material states and immaterial states. And the attention should be treated as unknown. That means I could totally see how in ancient times when they would say the 5 elements, earth, air, fire, water, then there was the question, okay, I'm noticing all these 4 elements, but what is the element of sight? So the reason in some traditions there's 4 elements, or in some there's 5, the 5th one was how consciousness was an element. But it wasn't an element in the same way as the periodic table, because the material realm, the condition it provides for the human being, the circumstance it allows, is through primarily the conscious waking state. We experience dream states, and then there's deep sleep. So pretty much we are like phones that we sleep to get charged, and then we wake up. You know? Now imagine this phone suddenly noticed that sure, if you wanted to move your hand, you need energy. But what if you wanted to move the thought of your hand? I will tell you that takes no energy. There's certain phenomenology that it's like, here's the thing, if you think you have to do something, you will get extremely tired. If you see what you want to do has already been done and you just take simple steps, eventually you will do it. You know? Michael Talbot says the electrons in a carbon atom in the human brain are connected to the subatomic particles that comprise every salmon that swims, every heart that beats, and every star that shimmers in the sky. Everything interpenetrates everything, and although human nature may seek to categorize and pigeonhole and subdivide the various phenomena of the universe, all apportionments are of necessity artificial, and all of nature is ultimately a seamless web. You know, guys, this is an implication that we define our progress on what reality means. But if the system we use to extract the mystery of the lifetime is how that is instantaneous. How have we been living in a story for so long and not noticing that there is a silent event taking place that, regardless of our opinion on it, it goes forth? I will tell you, there is really no secret to living. There's no secret. It can't even have a secret. You know, it's either all of it is a secret or it can't have a secret. That means you either look at the realm through a complex lens and endless mysteries, or you look at it through a simple lens, and all those mysteries are originating from your eyes. You know, it's like consciousness is a sun in an inner universe, in the inner verse. Attention is the sunbeams entering the eyes of thoughts that emanate. And when I think about the idea of God, there's moments where the idea for me seems to be the least godly thing. And I'm not saying this disrespectfully, but the notion is that the language, the ideology is saying it is inconceivable. That means I don't know how many people have thought about life from a theological angle, where it's as if, okay, if such a story has been set into motion, the truth that is moving the whole system is in the whole system. So technically, we thinking we are separate from the universal activity is how the forbidden fruit was bitten. What it means is we are inconceivable in all religious, I will tell you, ideology. People can ask it anybody, monotheistic traditions, people from there. The soul, I have asked religious communities, if the living experience is undermined by the language, then the experience is not there, it's not the focus. That means, imagine the truth was like you got a hug someone you love. Imagine that was truth. Now some people are believing, they are already hugging truth, and they're not doing it, they're just standing. They're like, yeah, I'm hugging truth right now. You know? But it would be a situation where some people, they don't have an opinion on truth because they have already hugged it. They have already noticed the energetic chaos underneath the thin ice of language. It is an energetic inconceivability. So think of it this way. If you zoom in to the self, you reach a point where, just like zooming in on a picture, imagine the Mona Lisa, you had a camera and you were zooming in. Imagine you zoomed in, you would just see a chunk of color. You would not see the form, the design, the specification. And it is somehow that we have found a way to zoom out from the earlier levels of evolutionary activity. So we have actually, by zooming towards an individual self, zoomed out of the inseparability of man and nature prior to the concepts were ever made. I once said in a talk, fear kills a man before he is lived. That if you are afraid, you are dead already. That means nothing will go forward. That's the bad thing about fear. It stops the continuity of the sincere vision. In the Abrahamic traditions, the soul is a mystery of the source within all things. So technically, from the religious angle, multidimensionality is unified. And from the secular angle, multidimensionality is nullified. And those within all philosophers are pretty much like, what is this? You know, ones at both sides are in some sense dismissing the fact that we require multidimensional tolerance to actually become an advanced civilization. Multidimensional tolerance means that you have been acquainted, think of it this way, since the beginning of your life, whoever's listening, or since the beginning of your life till now, how many different versions of yourself have you looked through and lived through? Just try to fathom how many, your memory, your intelligence, how many versions of the world and yourself it has recorded. I am telling you, it is like a camera. It's just like the cameraman is unknown. And we are saying the cameraman is neural activity in the brain. And there's some people who are giving talks online who are saying the cameraman was never inside the camera. It's remote. It's a remote camera. The soul, the individual soul, is a drone of a higher dimension. You know. Guys, I gotta go find the Phoenix. I'll be back soon. to continue. Is the world made of atoms? Is the world made of stories? Is the world even here when there's an unknown witness noticing how things change from one point to another? The cosmos is being resimulated every day ideologically. In the sense of thought and view and attention, it's as if it's a mixture of different levels of activity. As if, like, imagine someone running, and someone at the same time who's running is thinking about sitting down. Imagine you're someone who's thinking that you're seated on a chair in your inner realms, but in the outer realms you're running. That person has on one level, or let's say in your inner realms. Okay, I'll give you an example. Imagine you're on a bicycle in your outer realms, and in your inner realms you're going at a very fast speed on the bicycle, and you're trying to fathom in your inner realms how it would be if you ran at the same speed as the bicycle. You're trying to visualize to see if you ran at the same speed as the bicycle. Kind of like a Kevin Hart ostrich situation. You would be in the outer realms, engaged with a level of physical activity where you have to have an attention to the bicycle, to where the bicycle is heading, and the world of that localized physical self. And then you also have to think about the inner realms and that level of activity. Now check this out. This person, imagine you're on the bicycle again. You're visualizing yourself running beside the bicycle as you're riding the bicycle. Now imagine you stop riding the bicycle, but your inner realm visualization keeps running. And you begin visualizing yourself. The bicycle has stopped, but you're in your inner realms, you ran towards that in the street. So it means there is in one dimension a sort of density or texture to activity, and then in other subtler ways there's also activity. You know? This is one of the great philosophical mysteries. Does the person generate thought, or do we receive thoughts? Does the person have control over thought, or do they have only control over associating with the thought or not? The thought, like weather, comes and goes. Which is it? It's an epic time to be alive. A species is about to transcend the language of its past into a direct experience of the future. You see, the issue is that we are trying to process the mind similar to the body. You could say in an atom, the atom in some sense the atom is also a subject. Pretty much its geometrical shapes subjectified. And the accuracy of these geometrical shapes in the representation of what we see, that means, is knowledge our perception, or is knowledge beyond the reach of human perception? If there is 0.00, what amount of zeros, like 1% chance that the true wisdom of the realm is beyond human perception, then life gets a different rhythm. I will tell you, it's not a mindset change. It's not a belief system change. It's not a promise to the cosmos. It's not being uh, a good boy of divinity, or a servant of chaos. It is all about kind of like music. Think about in your life how you have heard music. It's something that it was irrelevant. Like every time I hear music, it has nothing to do with me. It's just sound. That means if like this is the thing. If a person was speaking super slow, it would just be like sound. It would technically be incomprehensible speech is music. Whether it's good music or bad music, that's another thing. That means check it out. If I say, let's say, like, if I say, hi, you know, if I just make a sound, just not as a word, I could make the sound, hi, then I can say the word hi, like hello, hi, then a person can even amplify this. Imagine it was hi, 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 hi. It would goes out of comprehension. So really, what we are considering language and meaning and interpretation is simply a certain tonality. I would say if the world is made of language, your tone suggests your reception. So it's as if the soul is the voice of the universe, you know? And the human being is like the word that this voice is saying. And to this word, just like a word is made of different letters, we have seen the constitution of our layered realm. There's so much to this life that is unknown. Too early the species has settled into certainty, and I will tell you, this is what the streets like. I don't know. There was this poetry from Hafez, the Sufi poet. He says it's like when the person. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it was Hafez. Frederick Nietzsche said something similar. I'll tell you both. Hafez, the Sufi, was a poet from 700 years ago or something. He says it's as if like a philosopher in the middle of the night is realizing something true about the nature of reality, getting the lantern and running out in the streets back in the day and shouting, you know, as if there's another light behind the eyes other than what's held as a lantern. The other story was actually how the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, he animated. Philosophers do something cool, by the way, guys. Certain great philosophers have done this. Their inner realms allow them to reanimate the world. They reanimate history. That's a part of like the whole philosophical endeavor. To keep the world alive, the design of the efficient alive, even though the surface can change. It can appear inefficient in one season, efficient in one season. The game can be played in many ways. And in religious thought, and not just limited to religious thought, monotheistic religions and polytheistic religions as well. And I remember I read something online. It was this person that wrote this epic thesis, and the person had made a discrimination between monotheistic religions and polytheistic religions, that in the monotheistic religion, everything is God, S. Everything is God's. God owns everything in the monotheistic tradition, Abrahamic religions. But in the polytheistic traditions, everything is God's. So you see, it's only a comma difference between monotheism and polytheism. you know? So, in both polytheistic traditions and monotheistic traditions, the moment there was a superior archetype that transcended the human form, part of the dialogue and communication of the individual in the lesser dimension to the considered higher dimensional entity or deity was to, in some sense, sacrifice, not that it's called, it was an egoic sacrifice. Egoic. That means the idea of the individual had something had to happen to that before the nature of the reality had to be seen. And when I say the idea, it's not a physical thing. What does that mean? That means a person could be sad and you can give them a bouquet of flowers and they'll be like, what is this? These flowers, I hate these flowers. You give them a bouquet of flowers and they only see the thorns, you know? So what does that mean? That means the inner realm sometimes needs an inner solution. That means some problems in life, yes, they're from the outer realms. You can't do much. At best, you soldier through or serve the realm. But in the inner realms, certain problems are self-fathomed. That means they have been inputted by the invisible into the visible. And some things, they are from the visible influencing the visible. So I'm saying that in religious thought, there is this notion of submission of the I thought, and as the I thought submits to the truth, there was never a human being. That means think about end of days, the idea of the apocalypse, and think as if every person got judged, every living creature from the Abrahamic context, religious context, got judged, and they went to heaven, hell, whatever, and it was done. What after? What after everything is known? I will say, man, the species has noticed an unknown. We have known gods, and we have unknown gods. We can say this is a parallel reflection of how we have a known self and an unknown self, for that unknown self to even have a superiority. In Vedic thought, the notion of deities went very supreme, where it was very abstract, where it was as if higher dimensional beings live in emotions. Live in emotions. What does that mean? That means a group of angry people, or sorry, not angry people, a group of people having desire or greed. It was as if the moment those people were desirous or greedy in a certain, with a sort of subconscious hatred, Kali would appear. So what it is our states of mind are evoking what is authorized to occur in the realm. That means for the first time, we have to be conscious that we are communicating with a living universe. If you can open that gift, then you can travel back in time, and before you ever needed to subscribe to any of these talks, you would already be where now, where you are now. Can you imagine if the entertainment of our world was opposite? Imagine we had this sort of view of civilization, that TV was showing only good, positive, great news, and like the TV and entertainment were showing the most beautiful, utopic, efficient, incredible educational content on TV and media and everywhere, even the internet. Let's say, got a makeover. So what can I say? Notice the hourglass and you get. And honestly, I will tell you, if I was to look at my life and say that what I'm doing now was my purpose, I would say the purpose of human life cannot be dictated by humanity. This is the mind-boggling factor of the realm, that if we were to give purpose to the whole thing, we are treating the whole cosmos as our universe. So what that means is, if a species becomes nihilist or solipsist too quick, it misses out on its greatness. And so if TV was showing positive imagery, but we saw in society people had gotten bored, I actually think the entertainment industry should show so much chaos, so much messed up stuff, until people are like, okay, what is this? This is getting boring. You know, for how many times can we see guns shooting people on the screen? It gets boring. After some point, you want to see different dimensions to the same characters. This is what I noticed in film school, that many people, by the way, I studied film production, but I'll tell you this, that in my class, there was a lot of people, so like out of a class of 30, maybe 4 people wanted to be directors, and the rest just wanted to participate. You know? I really can't understand wanting to go into film without being a director. It doesn't, like, I don't understand, you know. But anyways, the whole point of it, what I'm saying is that in that class, different people would come and tell stories, and they were all trying to make their stories, in some sense, contemporary, artistic, and I realized, what is this? It's like this sort of nostalgic hopelessness that is this next theme of entertainment, it seems. You know, but I'll tell you, there was something there that I noticed, that people, and every director is different, of course, I'm gonna keep that in mind, you know. But I'm saying that for me, the character is what the film centers around. And if the person can make a complex character, their film will be incredible. But if the character doesn't have dimensions, you know, then the character is nothing. And that was the thing, that people want to fit into the ordinary, not realizing the only reason you're born as a new DNA is to bring the extra. I had made this film called Clone Kid, guys. Like, I had set up everything for it right before the shooting date. It was coronavirus happened, you know. I would like to say we are archaeologists of subjects as well. Carl Jung was an expert. Carl Jung was, I am telling you, it was as if it was as if Carl Jung had access to an overmind. Some philosophers, you see it in their work, they have access to an overmind, you know, where in the middle of their writing or in the middle of their speech, they become attributeless. In Sufi's poetry, Attar's poetry, Rumi's poetry, Sadi's poetry, and endless other mystical hymns, that's what you find, that the subject becomes the absolute prior to the subject and object being a relationship. If the absolute is here first, you can absolutely do anything. So it's in some sense saying, first bring peace to your inner realms, then seek peace to your outer realms. Storylines are everywhere. Like, every time I give a talk, that's what's happening. It's like I can't avoid it, you know. The only way to speak without a story is to give a silent sermon. And technically, the silent sermon has always been given, you know. Imagine somebody told you you had 100 years to see how far your species can go. What would you do? What would you do? I would say people, and I want to first speak to the laziest people on the road. I feel they have the greatest potential. And I will tell you, the whole point is, if the person tries it out for one day, just live for yourself. Only yourself. Be the most selfish person you ever know for one day. Try it out. Okay? And you see the karmic feedback. And then one day, be the most selfless person. Literally want nothing from the world. Literally be eyes that open and saw. And then eyes that close. So, as far as I'm concerned, all of suffering is considered to have meaning in a blink of an eye. We have to restore some sort of honor of a collective ethos. And I find that the idea of the advanced civilization is the liberating factor. Because people are living already. People are already living in civilization 1.0. It's just that it's not updated, right? Now the issue is we've been waiting for the leading central minds of the system to change the system, but the central mind hasn't. The central mind, and we are not even judging. That means some people look at the governments of nations as if they have done nothing. It could be, there could be corruption, there could be scandals, but it's still a force, It's still important, and so there's a view where a person can hate the past and try to defeat the past in the future, or the human being forgives the world that doesn't know better. That's it. There is no logic to a violence against a system of governance. Back in the day, yeah, even currently, it's not everything is perfect, but I'm just saying you cannot ever help someone by breaking them. That means imagine you weren't good at drawing, and there came a great artist, and this artist actually was a good person and wanted to inspire you to be a great artist, but this artist came up to you and said, "You're useless, you're nonsense, you can't even hold a pencil, go get out of here, you don't deserve to draw." And that great artist is trying to make the person realize their own value, but is doing it in an inefficient way. The greater artist would come and say, "How do you know you can't draw?" That means, imagine people, when the government of nations did something wrong, people were like, "Okay, how could you do it?" You see, neutrality in a world that is endlessly being torn apart between chaos and order sometimes is wisdom. Sometimes the person who has no opinion in a room filled with opinions is the wisest. But I'm just saying that if we want to break something, what's the point of wanting to fix it? You can't break something and then feel like that's fixing it, During the French Revolution, they had a reason to be violent towards systematic control. But now we have minds. Like, we're not, you know what I mean? Back in the day, the French king was just eating and people were getting starved. Now, people have a system where it's not just total starvation, mass starvation. It's mass starvation with certain opportunities, that you can get out of starvation. This still is not an efficient system. What we have to do is we have to have people of nations make a stoic decision on leadership, which has to do with character formation. That means every person who speaks, every person who moves is literally information as them relocating to itself. The idea is you use your mind, then you use your body. If you can't use your mind, you use your body. If all outcomes of discourse solving the problem has been as in some sense not, you know, if everything has been tried and nothing works, then it's a strange situation and it requires a different strategy. But if in a system that has potential, do you know what that means? That means imagine you were a football coach and the government of your nation was like a footballer, like a student, you know? And this football coach is like, okay, you know, I can totally break this kid's self-esteem and shatter his hopes of his career, or I can encourage the system. That means I honestly feel it's not that there is evil here. I mean, there is messed up shit going on, but I'm saying it's just that peace hasn't made that much of an effort yet. It's much easier to break something, and it's much easier to break something you don't know, or you're not responsible. But if you want to be responsible for something, you don't think about breaking it. You know, this idea also follows in relationships. You know, they asked this, there was this story, I read this on Facebook, to be honest. So some random person on Facebook deserves applause. The point is, the story is, this girl goes to her grandparents who were 60 and 65, and she goes to her old grandparents and says, how is it that you guys have been together for 40, like 50 years? I mean, not 40. It's too soon. I mean, it's enough. Okay, it's like, how have you guys been? Okay, 40 years makes sense. Okay, how have you guys been 40 years together? You know? And they gave us, the grandparents look at their granddaughter and they give such a simple answer. They say, we came from a time when things broke, we would fix it. That's it. Nowadays, people don't want to put an effort to fix things because of a righteousness of thinking they have to be a certain way. Status is disturbing the heart of the modern world. So the idea of who the person is the biggest component to what happens to the person. That means if the person says, this is why I have a sensitivity. You can say I'm a bit of a neat freak when it comes to language. That means people around me, those people who suddenly start self-depreciating, I instantly, either I leave the room or I tell them to stop expressing and stop vocalizing an inefficient energetic pattern. That means if one looks at the idea, let's say even for a second I want to entertain this from a theological standpoint. Let's say you're a religious person. What is prayer? Prayer is speech. So every moment a person is speaking, they are technically praying. So what does that mean? And what do people pray for in the theological view? They pray for what they want. So it's a suggestion of what are you setting as the idea of the self? What are you allowing yourself to set? Because I'll tell you, in my youth, I felt sharing my weakness with my world was a bonding factor. It's like it was something to talk about how I wasn't efficient, you know? It took me a while to realize, especially there was a quote from Hafez that woke me up. He said, the words you speak become the house you live in. So if a person says, you know, I can't do anything right all the time, the person says that, yeah, literally they're setting up their intelligence to only notice that. That means how often is it that a lucky person is asked, how are you lucky? And the person's like, I don't know. See, maybe that's why. Maybe not having an expectation on the realm reveals the true karma of the entity. So, welcome guys to the chat section. Feel free to ask questions. For me, it's honestly super odd how little questions are asked. But anyways, it's reality. Reality, one side of the coin is atomic, on the other side of the coin is a story. Our free will controls a certain range of the atomic through characterhood and storification. So what people really is their suffering is the story they have told themselves, or the story that has come from their outer realms that they were probably young and emotionally accepted before being able to bring reason. Because a person can have emotions, and that emotion can bypass reason. I'll give you an example. Imagine you're a young child, and you know your father told you to work hard. Or let's say you were a young child and you saw your father coming home late at work with a pile of papers every night. Imagine as a child you saw this. So then the child, that concept, has an emotional allegiance to the rawness of the simple soul, how it saw the complex. So the eyes, the emotions are how the mind believes. Thoughts, beliefs, I would say, thoughts are how the body believes. You know? And so you could be a person that somebody could say, hey man, you're destroying yourself. Because that is the outcome of maxing out energy. So it would be something where it's as if the person, they have an emotional, let us say, attachment to the idea of work. They will reason, but what can they do with that emotion? So, anyways, guys, I need to relocate. I'll be back in a couple minutes. Treat this as an intermission. Actually, never mind. I'll speak a bit more before I relocate. We are just being here, and as we move, the world is finding meaning. can treat it materialistically as if it's one picture and our movement makes it into a film, or we can treat it immaterialistically. It is a film, and what we consider to be materialistic truth is a snapshot, is a frame of this hidden film that is this cosmic activity. That means the question comes, are we inside a universe? Are we the actual universe? Or are we outside of the universe, and could it be the multidimensional birthright of the conscious to remember their source? The sort of poetically, it is your eternal birthright to remember your eternity. So, anyways, guys, I'm gonna relocate. Actually, I'll be right back. Intermission. Okay, guys, I'm back. Thanks for waiting. Something I forgot to say that I've made notes here. 2 questions. I thought that the title of this episode leads us to 2 major questions. I feel each of these questions can be a talk on their own. But here I would say the first question is, what do we do with the known time given to us, or what is in the known time? And what do we do with the unknown time given to us? That means we are in front of our eyes an object. I'm going to keep going back to this. In front of our eyes, we're an object. Because we're an object that can know other objects, perceive different objects. So that's the known time. So what we know about time is based on how we are an object and how this object changes from one point of reference to another point of reference. And so how we are a subject is where, what do we do with the unknown time? So that means, what do we do with the concept of time? And what do we do with what we see as the change of the object in time? The purpose of the body, be healthy, and then gracefully transition. The purpose of the mind is to pilot consciously plus universal memory or more. That means your mind is a rare opportunity for an animal to experience the whole universal activity as itself. Every DNA is like its own Rubik's Cube. The conscious free will, the conscious viewer has to find a way to solve it. We can say hidden storylines can be perceived in 2 types. There is hidden storylines that have nothing to do with unhidden storylines, stories that are visible. Or you can have hidden storylines that are extensions. They're like the branch of the tree. So I could say, all right, I'm a known being, I'm an individual, this is my name, this is my face, my shape, all of this, and I'm kind of existing in the linguistic simulation of the idea of a civilization. And this is unhidden to me, I know this. So now, if I was to ask who is, or where does the storyline, where does the known, the unhidden storyline go? The unhidden, the unhidden storyline, or let's say it like this, the known storyline is inside, like a concentric circle, inside an unknown storyline. And the unknown storyline is not a story. That's the whole point of it. So that means we are a known story in the unknown, inside an unknown story, and then the unknown story is inside a known story, and then that known story is inside an unknown story. Very strangely ungrounded but down to earth example would be, it's as if we're thinking, yay, human beings, nice. Then we suddenly see we're part of this galactic chess game beyond our skies, imagine. That would be like the unknown story, the sort of the archetypal formatting of light as the higher being. So what I mean is that pretty much We're identifying with the Earth. We're going to identify with the galaxy. When we identify with the galaxy, we would find ourselves equal in a totally different context than how we're finding ourselves to be equal now with the realm. And then that galactic story is, imagine it's in the story or imagination of some unfathomable gods or something. As Vedic thought seems to suggest, in Vedic thought, the idea, Krishna, I don't know what the exact date is, but I don't know why I remember this number, but it's like 54 million years of human life equals 3 nights of Krishna sleeping, or I don't know if it was, I think it's Vishnu sleeping. But the whole point is that higher dimensional life will be an unknown story to lower dimensional life. So whatever we do, it's like, think about the ant trying to fathom the storyline of the human being. The ant doesn't, do you know what I mean? It can't even relate. You know? The human species can relate to the unknown. Do you know how many animals don't know what the stars are? We are that rare creature, on the surface of this planet who was like, yo, what is that? I feel there should first be an advanced civilization should begin the foundation of its aim through nature. Nature is the only teacher that silently teaches you. Other teachers, they vocally have to teach, you know. And I'm telling you, this idea of the whole guru disciple thing was so outdated that I would say, in my view, it's just we are all either on an unknown battlefield, you know, we are generals on a battlefield, or we are pilots. For me, the pilot is the most spiritual archetype. I don't even say spiritual, I would say it is, to me, the ultimate archetype. I feel the pilot, if any person treats their moment like a pilot, that means your attention is piloting through existence experientially. And if you realize you're the pilot, you can not just exert control in the moment, but you can, you see, a surfer is not dominating the ocean wave. Do you know what I mean? It's a sort of symbiosis, but with animate phenomena, with inanimate phenomena. To extract these hidden storylines from a Taoistic angle, it's like how Lao Tzu says you gotta let go of who you are now to be who you're meant to be, something like that. So that means we cannot find the new if we are trying to just keep the past alive. And the whole crazy thing, can you imagine I think if most people's ancestors suddenly came to life and they were here, they'd be like, what are you doing? It's as if, like, there's, like, when you look at human life, you're either identifying based on what you know or based on what you don't know yet, you know? And when we reach the edge of the unknown, I can tell you, it's like you cannot see a new world if you're the same self. It's just not authorized. That means the person can't move the steering wheel to the left and want the car to go in the right way. What do we do with an unknown universe? We stare it in the face. What do we do with a known universe? We celebrate it. We should celebrate our victories against the unknown. Imagine I talked about it in one talk, celebration cultures will happen. That means it's as if like when 8 billion, what happens when 8 billion creatures on a rock, 8 billion human beings on a rock got bored? A rock in the middle of nowhere get bored, what happens? The species starts dancing. And that's really what we need in some sense. A sort of the dancer's freedom, but for the inner being. If you could close your eyes and begin to see this moment that you're in, and begin to see that, like a film, it can be rewinded and it can be forwarded at any speed. With the same instantaneity, somebody can visualize like an apple pie floating in the room. With that same instantaneity, you can allow something based on the real to get animate movement. What that means is, I'll give you an example. I'm holding a coffee cup in my hand. Okay, so this coffee cup, it's like in reality, yeah, coffee cup is here. It's real. Now I close my eyes and I'm still visualizing this coffee cup, just the coffee cup, though hovering in just pitch black abyss. Just the coffee cup. Do you know? Now, as that coffee cup is an accurate representation of reality, it has journeyed from the inner realm experience, has journeyed from the outer realms to the inner realms. That means the thought is based on reality. That means technically it's not that we are finding out anything about imagination. We are taking something real in an unreal, subtler state and then wondering what happens to it. And if I were to close my eyes, I can totally, like a drone, visualize myself observing every angle. The inner realms are like a probability generator. We are a biological system that generates probabilities so it doesn't die. you know? So the probabilities that are generated, just the fact that we have free will requires multidimensionality. If it was in one dimension, what free will? How are you free? What choice do you have? You're in one place. It is only that there can be different outcomes to the same moment for the conscious entity. Guys, the chat section is too quiet. It's freaking me out, I'm joking, guys. I'm joking. Yeah, so pretty much I'm just saying, think of all the different ways you could live. Those are hidden storylines. Think of how the mind can generate subtler versions of the self, and the self decides which one. Similar to a chess game, you see different ways that you can move the chess pieces. You can see different probabilities. It's not just about even the probability. It's about what the probabilities are alive to. That means in my inner realms, the responsibility of movement is very different. In my outer realms, the responsibility of movement is very, extremely different than the inner realms. In the inner realms, I don't do anything. In the outer realms, if I don't do anything, the person can't survive and exist. Do you see? So the mind isn't an object to be able to do something. It's like all those people trying to free their minds. Really? It's like first try to see the mind, then try to free it. Can you even see it? And so the mind, I'm telling you, it is not I would say from a Vedic standpoint, it's just an accumulation of impressions, which that's what karma was. It was like an accumulation of impressions, then who the person is being. That means from the Vedic standpoint, right now, me speaking, all the ideas I'm saying, technically these are out of all the accumulated impressions of from the field of activity of the knower. These are the ones that are bearing fruit. Do you know what I mean? These are the seeds that are sprouting out of all that ocean of accumulated impressions. Now, the only way you can get out of that ocean of accumulated impressions is to disown the owner of the fallacy. Aside from, it's not even reverse engineering. It's one of those things where, do you know how in some movies, some shows, they show like there's this epic warrior, the warrior beats all the bosses, gets to the last boss, and the last boss is not a very messed up, like, it's not a challenging warrior, it's himself, it's his shadow self. That means the last opponent the character is fighting it's himself. He's fighting himself. The last boss to um, beat is in some sense the chaos within, you could say, in this video game of life, or as Michael Talbot would say, holographic simulation. I treat my own existence personally in the same way I would see a bird flying in the sky, or like wind hitting trees, like the leaves of a tree all moving at the same time. For me, it's like it's just something that's naturally here. Like whatever opinion you have on it, it is here. You know, when it comes to biological existence. But conscious existence, in regards to what could consciousness be, that is it right now a character speaking to you, or is it the setting that is speaking to you? And for us to discriminate between this, because language was based on the singular dimension, based on a sort of duality. Beyond duality, there's no language. There isn't language in the same way. You can say all languages they require duality. You know why? Because if it was just one thing, it would have nothing to do. So I would say the first image is all of knowledge, technically, in that moment. It's as if one thing was missed. Before physics and metaphysics can cooperate, language requires to be studied. So how you have accepted language to be not just your I thought, but how from that I thought comes the correlation of everything else that's meaningful to you. I don't know why, guys, but I feel like going into a cold tunnel of Gandhi. Let's see what Gandhi has to say. You know, about the cosmic simulation. For those who are new, a code tunnel is pretty much I read a bunch of quotes to see how the inner realm of that human being opened its eyes to the world. Pretty much, that's it. Mahatma Gandhi says happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony. Mahatma Gandhi says you must be the change you wish to see in the world. Yeah, guys, it's like the birds and squirrels are not going to bring that change. Only Mahatma Gandhi says an eye for an eye only ends up making the whole world blind. Mahatma Gandhi says all the religions of the world, while they may differ in other respects, unitedly proclaim that nothing lives in this world but truth. Mahatma Gandhi says there is a sufficiency in the world for man's need, but not for man's greed. Mahatma Gandhi says, I object to violence because when it appears to do good, the good is only temporary. The evil it does is permanent. Mahatma Gandhi says the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. Mahatma Gandhi says an ounce of practice is worth more than tons of preaching. Mahatma Gandhi says when restraint and courtesy are added to strength, the latter becomes irresistible. Mahatma Gandhi says anger is the enemy of nonviolence, and pride is a monster that swallows it up. Excuse me. Gandhi says satisfaction lies in the effort, not in the attainment. Full effort is full victory. Mahatma Gandhi. An error does not become truth by reason of multiplied propagation, nor does truth become error because nobody sees it. Mahatma Gandhi says the real ornament of woman is her character, her purity. Mahatma Gandhi says man is supposed to be the maker of his destiny. It is only partly true. He can make his destiny only in so far as he is allowed by the great power. Mahatma Gandhi said a small body of determined spirits fired by an unquenchable faith in their mission can alter the course of history. I feel, guys, anybody who really cares for, truly cares for the world, they will find themselves in the writer's room of history. Mahatma Gandhi says there is a higher court than courts of justice, and that is the court of conscience. It supersedes all other courts. Wow. That means our humanhood is a law that we cannot avoid. Okay. Hang on, guys, I'm finding these pictures to share. Okay. So guys, I want you to look at the wallpaper. There was a quote from Gandhi I just read. Um, where he says, there is a higher court than courts of justice, and that is the court of conscience. It supersedes all other courts. There's a Persian poet named Sadi. He says human beings are members of a whole, in creation of one essence and soul. If one member is afflicted with pain, other members uneasy will remain. If you have no sympathy for human pain, the name of human you cannot retain. That means if there isn't, on some level, for the human being, a sort of ability to empathize, to see that the other is in the similar situation, that means if you can't, if you don't care for a human being, for whatever kind of human being, but just if you don't care for the human being, you're not human. So this is why it makes sense that hatred was given a sort of demonic connotation. That ignorance had won first. It's a deviation of nature. Not that to make this to add a superstitious dimension to this, but I'm just saying when we're wondering about reality, it's all the linguistic simulation, and the linguistic simulation, there's different archetypes for different moments. Gandhi says, my uniform experience has convinced me that there's no other God than truth. Mahatma Gandhi says power is of two kinds. One is obtained by the fear of punishment, and the other by acts of love. Power based on love is 1,000 times more effective and permanent than the one derived from fear of punishment. Yeah, guys, the thing is, anytime fear is used, implemented as an algorithm in the system, it's like it's disturbing something. Some natural part of the system is getting disturbed by the fear. That means it's as if it's like a hole in a ship, you know? It's eventually, it's going to bring the whole thing down. It can, you know? Fear is really, we have to create a backup system to our fear. That means imagine if something terrifying happened, we all had to have enough of a backup system to be able to see at least the order counter. And of course, the fear usually is on what a person doesn't know. Because what you know, you don't fear it, you know it. It's like there's nothing to fear, there's no unknown element about it. You know, it's like I look at this, coffee cup. I don't fear this coffee cup. Why? Because I know it. So what enters the kingdom of the known is not to be feared, it's to be studied, really. That's it. That means this is something probably, people haven't heard, but study your fear. Like literally, you go buy a notebook and study it. Take notes, take notes. It's like, okay, I went to this moment. I experienced this level of fear. Until one sees we don't have time for fear. The temporary must march toward efficiency. Really, success in this modern world is efficient vision, and plus a sort of sincerity and decency along the way. Mahatma Gandhi says, "Where there is love, there is life." Um, Mahatma Gandhi says, "We may never be strong enough to be entirely nonviolent in thought, word, and deed, but we must keep nonviolence as our goal and make strong progress towards it." And guys, pretty much Gandhi is saying, like, how else? How else can we have peace? It's like the animalistic savagery has to decline, or has to be declined. Wow. Gandhi says the only tyrant I accept in this world is the still voice within. That means if you're in a moment of justice and you could do something and you're not doing something, that still voice is on the side. It's like having the same result as tyranny. Mahatma Gandhi says, "What do I think of Western civilization? I think it would be a very good idea." This man is in, you know, you know. Gandhi says culture of the mind must be subservient to the heart. Mahatma Gandhi says interdependence is and ought to be as much the ideal of man as self-sufficiency. Man is a social being. Oh my god, this next quote is epic, guys. Mahatma Gandhi says, "Those who know how to think need no teachers." Yeah, because everything is there. It's like, what is there to teach? You're in an unknown world. We've explored it this far. Mahatma Gandhi says, "Religion is a matter of the heart. No physical inconvenience can warrant abandonment of one's own religion." Yeah, it's a non-physical relationship with the realm. Pretty much, guys, the linguistic simulation is deep. Mahatma Gandhi says the moment there's suspicion about a person's motives, everything he does becomes tainted. Wow. Mahatma Gandhi says it is unwise to be sure of one's own wisdom. It is healthy to be reminded that the strongest might weaken and the wisest might err. Mahatma Gandhi says intolerance is itself a form of violence and an obstacle to the growth of a true democratic spirit. Mahatma Gandhi says, when I admire the wonders of a sunset or the beauty of the moon, my soul expands in the worship of the Creator. Mahatma Gandhi says, violent means will give violent freedom. That would be a menace to the world and to India herself. Mahatma Gandhi says, it has always been a mystery to me how men can feel themselves honored by the humiliation of their fellow beings. Mahatma Gandhi says, let us all be brave enough to die the death of a martyr, but let no one lust for martyrdom. Yeah, I mean, the martyr. See, guys, sacrifice is not. It's like, I don't know. It's like unnecessary if it doesn't need to be there. I'm not saying in regards to, for example, sacrificing an I thought for the experience of a new moment. I'm not saying it in that sense. I'm saying it like just it's like um, efficiency um, can get away from with the best result. Something like that. Mahatma Gandhi says spiritual relationship is far more precious than physical. Physical relationship divorced from spiritual is body without soul. Mahatma Gandhi says if cooperation is a duty, I hold that non-cooperation also under certain conditions is equally a duty. Mahatma Gandhi says if patience is worth anything, it must endure to the end of time, and a living faith will last in the midst of the blackest storm. Mahatma Gandhi says a principle is the expression of perfection, and as imperfect beings like us, excuse me, and as imperfect beings like us cannot practice perfection, every moment, oh my God, we devise every moment limits of its compromise in practice. Oh yeah, we devise every moment's limits of its compromise in practice. I don't know. Yeah, that means if we want something perfect because we're imperfect beings, I mean, it's endless evolution in that sense. Mahatma Gandhi says, though we may know him by 1,000 names, he's one and the same to us all. Gandhi says, morality is the basis of things and truth is the substance of all morality. And guys, I'll end off with this. Actually, two quotes. Actually, three. Gandhi says the main purpose of life is to live rightly, think rightly, act rightly. The soul must languish when we give all our thought to the body. Mahatma Gandhi says man's nature is not essentially evil. Brute nature has been known to yield to the influence of love. You must never despair of human nature. And finally, the last quote, the last, or actually, sorry, one more. Gandhi says freedom is never dear at any price. It is the breath of life. What would a man not pay for living? Mahatma Gandhi says providence has its appointed hour for everything. We cannot command results, we can only strive. Anyways, guys, I've pretty much said what I wanted to for this episode. I would say that really we are a character in a story. If we realize the world is unknown first, then the knowledge is an opportunity, is a privilege, is an advantage, is a unique position where we have access to you know, potential futuristic chess moves. While our eyes are open, let us wonder who the seer is. Thanks for listening, guys. I'll be on Discord for those interested in dialogue. And if there's enough people, we can evoke a topic. Much blessings and else. And just one more thing: is reality made of stories? Um, because it is, and we're aware it is. It never can. It never can be made of stories because we're aware it is a story. There is an additional viewing dimension, observing, unknown observing dimension. So anyways, guys, thanks for listening. Much blessings.